afternoon to each and every one of you. We are so glad to come into your homes. Just wanted to take a moment to introduce you all. This is the Deborah's Voice Show, and I'm here as your host, Dr. DeJuan Jackson, to be able to empower and impart into you just some tools and truths that will bless your life. And so, as I shared with you all a few weeks ago, that we have this segment where we're able to share with you all on multiple topics, all right, on multiple topics. And so we're just going to be sharing today. We're talking about relationships, and I think this is going to bless you. I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about relationships, because I think that out there, everybody is looking for a relationship, right? Everybody is looking for, some type of love. We want to feel connected. We want to feel like somebody's there for us. We want to feel like we have people in our lives of value, right? So I think the most important thing when we talk about relationships, that we understand that relationships are a significant part of our lives, right? Because I'm a pastor as well, the Bible talks about, how can two walk together unless they agree. It also talks about in Proverbs how if two are together, then the one can warm the one who is cold, right? So when two people are working together in a relationship, how do you know it can be a wonderful and a beautiful thing? I recently wrote a book, and my book is called The Misconception of Love and Relationships, and I'll just show you, this is my book that I recently wrote, and you can definitely contact us via DeJuanJackson.com on my website and order this book, or you can also call into our local office at 251-301-7609, or you can also inbox us on Facebook through our Women of Virtue page or DeJuan Jackson page, and we'd be happy to get a copy to you. They are just $15, and it's going to bless your life. All right, so when we're talking about relationships, I want you to think about this, because love in its proper balance is the most beautiful thing, right? Love in its proper balance is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. As I share in my book, over almost 40 years, my parents were married before my mom passed away, and my parents had such a wonderful relationship. They were example to me and to many other people in life. They were able to communicate. They knew how to balance things in life. They knew how to enjoy life. They knew how to share, right? So when we think about love, we want to talk about a husband and a wife, amen. Or if you're dating and you're getting ready to enter into marriage, I want to just give you some tips that I think that will be effective for you during this particular time, right? One of the number one things in relationship that is needed is honesty, all right? It's very, very important. If you have a relationship and you're going to cause that relationship to endure for a period of time or for longevity, one of the greatest things you can do is be honest with the person, even if it's going to hurt them. You want to tell the truth. Why? Because when you tell the truth, it lets the person see that you are genuine. It lets the person see that you are willing and open to share. Even if it's going to hurt them at the moment, they will be able to trust you and know that you're able to bond and to grow in your relationship. So honesty is very important. So when we think about being honest and we think about being open, right? You want to share your heart. You want to be able to become vulnerable with that person. So if I'm going to be honest, I'm also going to have to learn to be vulnerable. And so if I don't understand that God really wants us to be vulnerable, that we as a person have to be vulnerable to somebody. So in your relationship, if it's in your marriage or in a close friendship or even a dating relationship, one of the things that you're going to have to do is learn to be vulnerable. And a lot of times we don't like being vulnerable because it causes us to have to trust that a person will not expose what you're sharing, that a person will be able to be trustworthy in what you're sharing and relating into them with. But I want you to understand that if you are being honest and you're being vulnerable, the relationship can really grow and it can really go into places that you never thought possible. Many times when people are in relationships, they don't realize that if they're not willing to share and become naked, right? I have to go back to the Bible, being a pastor, right? The Bible says that Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed, which means that they were able to share their flaws. They were able to share their insecurities, right? They were able to share all of the things about them. And so today, we know, of course, we're not walking around naked. We're not walking around without our clothes, but there should be a person that you're able to just bear all, a person that's not going to be judgmental, a person that's not going to prejudge you or begin to talk negative when you begin to share, your heart, when you begin to share your disappointments, when you begin to share the spaces and places in your life that maybe you feel as though, this is where I failed. This is where, I don't feel like I have victory. This is places where I feel like I'm not advancing. And so all of those things will cause you to be able to open up yourself the more that person is willing, the more that person is open. So I told you how important it is to be honest. I told you how important it is to be vulnerable. But let me tell you how important it is to make sure that if you're going to be vulnerable, you got to be vulnerable with a person who is trustworthy, right? You want to be vulnerable with a person who is trustworthy. So if I'm going to be vulnerable, I have to make sure that the person that I'm going to be vulnerable with in my relationship is a person that's not going to go back out and start talking about everything that you shared. Because when you find a person that is not able to hold what you share, how many know that it's going to be hard to be vulnerable? It's going to be hard to share. It's going to be hard to expose your heart. It's going to be hard to tell, them things, because why? You don't want to put yourself in the positioning, or you don't want to be able to be vulnerable to a person that you feel that you cannot trust. So that's why it's important that you have to have trust, right? You have to be able to be willing to know that this person is going to hold in confidence the things that you share. And so when you're building a love relationship, these are key targets that are needed. You have to be willing to have that love. You have to be willing to have that honesty. You have to be willing to have that trust. You have to be willing to be vulnerable, right? And then you have to be able to communicate. So if I'm not a communicator, how about that? If I'm not a communicator, then you have to learn how to speak little by little, right? You're going to have to learn how to open up. Maybe you grew up in a house where you weren't talked to a lot, or you didn't have a lot of communication with your parents. Maybe you didn't have, that open avenue, but you're going to have to learn. Why? Because in a relationship where there is a breakdown of communication, there will be a breakdown in relationship. So if you don't know how to talk to your spouse, or you feel like you can't get to your spouse, or you feel like you can't speak to the one that you're dating, or the one that you're trying to connect with as in a relationship that will pursue and go to a place of marriage, right? Then you want to understand that I have to learn how to get them to communicate. And so in learning how to get people to communicate, one of the greatest things I've learned is to be patient and learn how to be a listener, right? So if I'm hearing a particular person start to share their heart or share something, then I have to learn how to listen. I have to listen effectively to exactly what it is that person is trying to share with me, and not interrupt. Because a lot of times I will try to interrupt the person, or I want to, stop them from what they're saying, but you be attentive and you be silent. One of the wonderful lessons that I've learned is that you can go in and say, listen, I want to have a conversation with you, and I'm asking you, please don't interrupt me until the end. Because what happens a lot of times when communication is happening in relationships, once you start interrupting the person, then it's harder for that person to get everything out. So it's so important for you to wait until that person has shared as much as they possibly feel like they can share at that appointed time. And then even if you need to have a notebook or have your phone or something there that you could jot notes, or you could take something down and then begin to reply or respond to that person, so that way you're able to respond effectively, right? And so even in communication, how many know every time that person may share with you or open up their heart or begin to unlock or begin to communicate, how many know that it's not always needing a response? Okay, I'm going to say that again. You're not always needing a response, meaning that you don't immediately have to give them a response because they have told you something about them, good, bad, indifferent. You can just listen to what they have to say and then maybe say, you know what, let me think about it, let me pray about it, let me wait on it, and then respond. So it's not always that you have to immediately give a person a response as soon as they share something with you. And so for some of you, this may be hard because you may want an immediate response. You may want that spouse or that person to be able to tell you back immediately in that relationship what it is that they're thinking, what it is that they're feeling. But when you learn different types of personalities and you understand that everybody can't think on the spot, right? Some people, it takes them a moment and it takes them time to process what you have said. Let them ponder on it, let them think on it, and then come back and be able to respond